Hello everyone, my name is Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and these are my friends, Clara Schumann, Johannes Brahms, and we are the Composer Super Friends. We, along with some other guy, are going to teach you pretty much everything you need to know to get started in composition. We're very excited. We're going to start with the basic building blocks, and we're going to move on from there. So, anything to say? Have fun. Take it one step at a time. Hey everyone, in this first part we're going to talk about the smallest building blocks of music and how we can put them together to make larger forms. So the first one is the motive, right? It's just the most basic musical idea that you can have. You might know Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Oh, I know. Let me go with this one. It's the one that goes ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Yep. Thanks, Brahms. That's the one. Okay, so that little motive, ba 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 ba, appears throughout the piece in lots and lots of different forms. So at the very beginning, you can hear ba 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 bum, and then again down a step, right? Ba 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 bum. But then he uses that to build the whole melody that follows. Ba 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 ba, etc. So what we're going to try to do today is think about ways that we can make small motives that can turn into big things. So let's just start by writing something really, really simple. Let's do 3 notes in 3/4. We'll go E, C, E. You might think that that is not a whole lot of stuff to be going on. And you're right, you probably wouldn't construct a giant symphony out of that. But again, that Beethoven thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 4 notes. So let's start with these 3 notes and see if we can figure out ways to manipulate them into something cool. So one of the first things that you can do is called ornamentation. You think about a Christmas tree. First of all, it's a bare green tree, and then you put lights on it and little baubles and things like that. So we're basically going to add lights and baubles to our little third thing here. So let's just add passing tones in between them. Oops. Okay, so we've gone from... It's already got something, right? It's not as bare and bland as it was before. Okay, we can do that. We could do all sorts of things like that. We could, instead of going down, we could do something like going up in between and hopping down. So we had bum 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 and then ba 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 bum bum. I think. Yeah, that was pretty close. I don't know if I like that one as well as the one that just has the 8th notes in a row. But so that's one thing that we can do, and that's called ornamentation. Another thing we can do is flip it upside down. That's, if you're ever stuck for something to do with a motive, just try turning it upside down and you'll be amazed. So instead of bum bum bum, we're gonna go bum bum bum. So basically all the C's we turned into E's, and all the E's we turned into C's. And again, maybe that's not very, very interesting, but if you start to add those 8th notes in again into that inversion, that's the fancy word for it, but just turning it upside down, you'll start to hear some really cool stuff. So okay, that's all well and good. So we've got this basic idea. We could do more stuff to it. If it wasn't symmetrical, this one is kind of symmetrical, we could turn it around. So if I did bum bum bum, we could do the opposite of that, right? This is fancy word retrograde. You can impress your friends. Bum bum. So that's just turning it around backwards. And then you could invert that too, right? You could turn that on its head as well. So that would be, I would go, instead of going down a step, I go up a step, and then down a third. So already we have all these things that we've created from just that very small melodic idea. So let's see if we can put them together into something that that makes a little bit more sense than just one building block, right? We need to start building our tower. So what we need to get to is a phrase. Ooh, a phrase is like a musical sentence. It contains one complete musical thought. Okay, Mozart, yeah, that's pretty close, I think. So so we're looking to try and create a complete thought. So if I was just going to write my original motive again, C, E, C, and then I'm going to take it and I'm going to move it up a step. D, F, D. If I just play that much, sounds nice, but it's not. It doesn't feel like a complete thought yet. So let's keep going. Let's move it up another step, but let's turn it upside down. Ooh. And I'll play it again. Tell me if it's finished. It's not, right? It still needs one more thing. So let's add a dotted half note there. And let's see if that now makes that feel like an idea that could stand by itself. Yeah, that's starting to sound like something, right? Even though it's very, 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 very simple, we have something that sounds like a complete musical idea. So that's a phrase. We could make another one. Let me move that over here. Let's again stick with a bum bum bum, and then let's try something with maybe some of those eighth notes, right? So bum 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 bum, and then upside down, bum bum bum. Okay, so you'll notice when I'm writing this, and we'll talk a little bit more about writing melodies later, but what I'm trying to do is keep it fairly stepwise and small jumpy. I don't want too many big jumps, but I did put a pretty big jump right here at the end, right, leading into that dotted half note. So let's listen to this and see what we think. That feels very final, right? It feels like, yes, we reached the end. So if I play this whole first section, okay, so we have two phrases, two things that I think we can agree sound like complete musical ideas, but when we play them in that order, they don't sound like they flow from one to the next, right? It feels like that first one is very finished, and that second one has more of a kind of question-y feel, right? So maybe if we flip them and tried the more plain one first that ends with the D. All right, so I can do this. Magic of copy and paste, right? Okay. So now I've got my kind of plainer one that ends with a D, and the reason that this is going to feel less finished is that when we end with the tonic, we're in C major, right? So the tonic just means the home note. So we end with that home note, that tonic, then it feels very final. If we end with a note that's not the tonic, it's going to feel less final. So you know that C major chord, right? If I build a C major chord, I've got C, and I'm going to build two spaces above that, E and G. Okay, C, E, and G. So if I ended with the E, that would feel a little less final than the C, and the G a little less final again, probably. You'll notice that the D is not in either of those. That actually belongs to the 5 chord probably in this case. So the 5 chord, and when I talk about 5 chords, all I mean is if I write my C major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If I built triads on top of all of these, they each have their own function. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. For right now, this 5 chord is built on the 5th note of the C major scale. I know you can all play your C major scale. So on that 5th note of the C major scale, if we build space, 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 we want 3 spaces in a row, it's going to give me my 5 chord. So if I go back to this one, bum, and I'm going to put bum, maybe up an octave. Okay, so you'll hear that these two match up, and it makes it feel even more like it's kind of a question right here. And we can figure out what to put in the middle later. So that G major feels like it really wants to keep on going, right? Even though it feels like a complete musical idea, it wants to keep going. We call that, in fancy words, a half cadence, because it doesn't feel as strong as a full cadence, where a perfect authentic or an imperfect authentic cadence, where it landed on the tonic note, on the tonic chord. Then this one just kind of lands on the 5 chord and feels like it needs to keep going. So if I add another C major chord here, going back, and then this one ends on the C, we talked about that, it feels like a C major chord. Okay, so let's listen to this again. So you feel how now this flows, right? We have almost, it sounds like the music is asking a question, and then it's answering that question. So once we have a phrase, especially one that ends on a 5 chord like that, the half cadence, if we have a phrase, we can repeat the beginning of that phrase and make it a little bit different and end on a 1 chord. We have a kind of a question and answer setup that always works really nicely. So you can build a lot of music out of a very, very small amount of material. So let's just quickly finish this off so that we can hear some music. Let's see, it probably wants to be that, and then I have my G major chord, and I'm just going to fill this in the most boring possible way. Okay. Alright, so now listen to this, and again, listen really for how the first half feels like it's asking a question, and the second half feels like it's answering it. It's going to give you a lot of really good momentum to get your piece moving forward. Alright. And obviously you don't want to leave your left hand just sitting in those block chords. There's lots of cool things we can do with that. For now, I'm going to leave it, talk about that later. So that's really the very basic building blocks of music. The motive, the phrase, and then this question and answer thing that we've written here is called a period. It's just a fancy way for a question and answer thing that's 2 phrases long. So yeah, we're gonna talk about slightly larger applications of this now. In 1 second. Ah, yes, I use motifs all the time. You know, my Eine kleine Nacht music. Do, 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 do. Catchy. Do, 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 do. That opening bit, do, 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 kind of gets expanded into do, 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 do. And the whole thing gets turned around to finish off the phrase. Do, do, do. Do, 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 do. Clever. What about you, Brahms? Oh, I love periods. The main theme from the finale of my first symphony, you know. Bum ba 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 bum ba 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 bum 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 ba bum bum ba bum ba 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 bum bum ba ba. You listen to the first half, it asks the question, bum ba do 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 do, half cadence, and the second part ends it, bum 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 bum, just a little bit like Beethoven. Wagner?
What are you doing
I
here?
too like motifs, but I call them light motifs. You might have heard of them.
Have to be special.
It's okay. Yes. In my operas, there are many, many leitmotifs that tell the audience what each character is thinking and feeling. Because you would never know otherwise.
How rude.
Bye-bye.
Okay, let's keep going.
So now we're going to take a look at, now you've got those periods, how we can turn those into full-fledged pieces, right? And don't worry, we're going to talk about all the elements of this. I just want to kind of lay out the big picture here so we can dive into it later. So I'm going to talk about 4 forms today: binary form, ternary form, rondo form, and then finally AABA, which is sometimes known as song form. And all of these can work really well for your compositions, and they all kind of go on the same idea, and that is one of contrast, right? So if you had the same thing going on the whole time, it would get really pretty boring. If you kind of switch things up and then come back, or switch things up and keep them switched up, it can be a lot more exciting for an audience to listen to. So a binary form, very, very simply, just means it's 2 parts, and you can see this on the screen. We've got part 1 that goes up to the repeats, and part 2 that goes up to the end. So usually we think of this, we describe these things with letters. So this first part up to the repeat is A, and then the second part up to the second repeat is B. And you can have different types of binary. You can have one where you come back to the original material. You can have one where you don't, you just have a B section that's closely related. Either way, the B section takes the original stuff and kind of messes around with it, develops it, we might say. So if you notice, I took the original motive that we were working with, I turned it upside down because I like that inverted version a little bit more. I also put it in the bass. So this is in 2 voices, but you'll hear as we go through that it still maintains a lot of harmony. So let's listen to it real quick, and then we can talk about what's happening. Okay, so we can clearly hear that we have this opening phrase, sort of like we did in the last video, or last part of the video. We have a period, right? So we have bum 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 bum, and then it does the same thing. It comes down into that half cadence, and then the second phrase starts there, begins the same way, but then instead of going down to that F, it goes up to that B to give me a nice high point for that melody. Then comes back down to the tonic. And then the second part starts, and it's clearly, you know, by all the accidentals, it's not in the original key anymore. So we're in C minor now. So same tonic, different flavor, right? So we start off in C minor, but by here with the mezzo forte, we come back into the original C major so that we can finish it off and feel like we've gone somewhere. The contrast comes from the C minor here, and then we've come back home. You'll notice the material doesn't really get much different from, you know, how it was in the beginning. Instead of it being E, C, E, now we have the upside down version, the inversion. We have C, E flat, C, and we still have these kind of scales that come up that are reminiscent of the opening. So it doesn't feel like something that's totally different and totally new. It has similar aspects to it. But then it also feels like it's going somewhere, right? It feels minor and kind of a little bit more melancholy, spooky, I don't know. And then finally it comes back and we get kind of a, instead of going back to exactly what we did in the beginning, more of a condensing, I would say, of this scale here. into this idea, and then we finish it off the same way. So that's basically a binary form, an A and a B that are pretty closely related but still have a little bit of that contrast that's going to make the music interesting to listen to. So let's look at the next one, a ternary form. Ternary form is a three-part form that is A, B, A, right? So the really important part here is that you start somewhere, you go somewhere different, somewhere contrasting, and you can do that by changing up the key, changing up the rhythms, changing up the melody, whatever you feel like doing to make us feel like we've gone away from our safe home place, right? And then we come back at the end to our home. It might be a little bit different, but it's definitely recognizable as our home. It comes back to the original key. So if we listen to this ternary form, we'll look for our A, our B, and our A. I use that same little motive again. In fact, I used the same opening 8 measures, but I then went somewhere quite different for the B section. So see if you can tell the difference. So you'll notice that it's pretty clear when we come back to the A section, right? We'll call this A prime because it does change just a little bit, and we have a slightly more active bass line around this area. The original part we'll call A, right? Again, it's opening material. And then right here where we suddenly go into F major, we'll call that our B section. And so let's kind of talk about the ways that it's different, right? So we've lost that bum bum ba, that third based motive, although it does sneak in places. Like you could say that this is related to it, and clearly this measure is, because we don't want it to be totally out of left field, right? We want it to sound like it belongs in the same piece, but we also want it to sound pretty different. So we've got still a kind of arpeggiated thing, but in this case it's going third and then a fourth instead of 2/3, and continuing to go up. Then we get a new rhythm that we haven't had before, this dotted quarter note plus an 8th note. So that gives it a little bit of a different feeling. We get that twice. The bass part's a little bit more active than it was in the opening, and probably the biggest thing is that we get some chords, right? So we lose our 2-voice feeling. We get two voices in the bass there, 3 up in the right hand, 3 over here, 3, and then we come in for a nice cadence. We also kind of extend that cadence so that we can get back to the right key, because if we ended with the F and we went straight back into the A prime, I'm not sure that it would sound as good as it could if we have this kind of little tag on the end of the B section to transition us back to that A. So that's really all there is to ternary. It's 3 parts. The A's on the outside are pretty similar to each other. The B is different in a number of ways, whatever you want it to be. It still should be recognizable as part of the same piece, but definitely different enough to provide contrast. A rondo form is really just kind of an extension of that. So we have A, B, A, but then we're going to add another different contrasting section, a C, and then we're going to come back to A, and then a D, then A, E, A, F, and you can go as far as you want. You could stop with C. You could go to X, right? If you really want a really, really long piece. So rondos are a great way of expanding this ternary idea to a bunch of different places where you still have this feeling of a home section, which is the A, and then we go different places, and every time you come back you feel a sense of relief, you feel resolution. So the last part is AABA, which is song form. So I'm just going to play this through. Maybe I'll let Brahms do a little bit of singing for us,
Okay.
if he's feeling so inclined.
Yes.
And then we'll talk about it really quickly. Mondays I wake up feeling so sleepy, gotta go to school. But I feel like curling under the blanket 'cause the air's too cool. I know that I'll be late, but I don't contemplate my fate if I don't meet my yellow bus on time. So I pull my blanket over my head and take a little nap before school.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Brahms.
Applaud.
So in this case, we
Applaud.
have a different harmonic structure that we'll talk about later. But all I want to note is that we have this first phrase, which is up to here, and doesn't function quite the same way as a classical phrase, and that's okay. So we get that go to school, and then we get that same thing again. It changes a little bit at the end to make it feel like it's going somewhere different. So that's my second A of the A-A-B-A. And then the third A, which in certain songs, if you have a large scale A-A-B-A, the B is often known as the bridge. This is quite a short one, so it's more of just a different part that gives us some contrast. So we really change up the rhythm, we change up the pitch level, right? And so it gives a nice feeling of change there. And then we come right back and get that nice feeling of coming home for that final A. So that is song form. And again, it's just really pretty simple. You use an idea, you use it again, you do something different, and then you come back. All right, I'll see you soon.
Oh, Brahms, that was quite lovely.
I think I did quite a good job. Next time you can sing, though.
No, I think I'll stick to the piano, actually. All right, let's learn about melodies now.
Ooh.
Okay, let's talk about melodies now. So what we're looking for a melody is something that we can go away singing, and that means it has to be singable, right? So what we really don't want is something that's all over the place, like... And that can be really cool. There's some awesome music, especially from the 20th century, composers like Webern, where what we think of as the melody is probably less important and it skips around all over the place. We get more of a tone color sense from that. But I don't think we're really ready for that. So why don't we try something that's mostly stepwise with a few jumps here and there. We want it to be memorable, so we don't want something like this. Let's say... Bum 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 bum. It's not really going to do it, right? We're not going to walk out of the concert hall humming that one. So it has to have something, some movement to it. So let's try and aim for a high point. It's really good, both in melody and in the piece as a whole, if each section kind of has its own high point. So we can write a melody with a high point, and then the piece should kind of develop from there and get its own big climactic point. And those often work best about 2/3 of the way through, but you can make them work pretty much any way you want. So maybe let's think about a few melodies that we know. I heard Mozart earlier singing one from Eine kleine Nachtmusik. Bum 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 ba da 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 dum ba da 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 dum ba da 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 dum ba da ba da ba da ba ba dum. Gets up really high, and then it like squeezes a little bit higher. Ba da ba da bum ba da dum ba da dum ba da 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 dum bum bum, and it does it one more time so that we really get it. Ba 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 da 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 dum, and then it keeps going on from there. So it started with that kind of exciting phrase, and then it had a much more stepwise melody that went to a high point and sank back down, and went to that high point again, and then came down for the ending. Another song that you might know, Adele's "Someone Like You." You think about that chorus, ba-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-dum, ba-dum, ba-da-dum, bum, and then we're going to go up high, right? Bum ba da ba 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 da dum ba 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 bum, and then we're back down low. Ba da da dum ba da 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 bum bum bum. Maybe a bit too low for me. So both that melody from the classical period and that melody from right now have kind of the same sort of structure. We start with a kind of plateaued area, so it's pretty much in the same area, and then it goes up high, and then it comes back down low. So let's see if we can do something with that. So let's use what we know already. Let's try and make motives and phrases to create maybe an 8-measure melody. So I'm going to use a little rhythmic motive. Motives don't just have to be pitched; they can be rhythmic, like the da 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 dum we were talking about earlier. So I'm going to do a dotted quarter and eighth. It's kind of a memorable thing, right? All right. So I'm going to try and build something out of this. So mi re mi sol. Then we can kind of keep pushing up, right? Mi, fa, sol. We could have done a bunch of different things there. We could have gone mi, re, mi, sol, mi, re, do, or mi, re, mi, sol, mi, re, mi. And both of those options would have taken us off in different directions. So there are thousands and thousands of ways that you can configure these melodies. So let's add another bit of our rhythmic motive, that dotted quarter eighth, and then 2 quarters. So I've got a little high point, but I think I can probably go higher. Oops, that went out of the picture. So that can be kind of my half cadence at the end of measure 4, and then we'll use our dotted quarter eighth to build that nice high point in measure 5. And then we'll kind of come back to the opening, but with maybe a twist. Instead of E-G, I'll do G-E. Ooh, right? And then we'll come down for a nice authentic cadence. So this one's going to sound like this. Sounds a little bit melancholy. Oops, what is that? That's just a quick and dirty melody we made, right? And the way that it holds together is that each 2 measures starts with that dotted quarter eighth, and that kind of gives it some glue that's going to make it sound good. And you notice again that it's going up slowly. I want you to also look at how many steps versus skips there are. So we look at this first measure. We have 2 steps and 1 skip. And we skip down to the second measure, which is all steps, into the third measure, which has 1 skip. And then this last measure kind of encircles that G with the skip. And then we're going to do a big jump to measure 5 to really hammer home that high point, so everybody knows, oh, this is it. This is the big moment. And then if you have a big jump like that, a really good way to make it fit with everything else is to follow it with a step in the opposite direction. So I jumped up a 4th, right? G to C is a 4th if we count up, so G, A, B, C. So I jumped up a 4th, and I'm stepping back so that it really feels like it fits within the melody. You can make it work the other way, but I feel like it just sounds a little bit better if you step back from a big jump. So if I went down a 4th, I think thirds are probably okay, but if I went down a 4th or a bigger interval than that, then I would want to step up out of it. So always step opposite the direction you just jumped. So we jumped up to the C. We're going to do some steps and then jump down through a third, so it doesn't have to step in the opposite direction. Although I bet it would sound good if we did. Bum, 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 bum 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 bum. I don't know. Again, it could go either way. And then this, whether it's a G or a B, is going to be a stepwise measure with one jump, and then we're back to the beginning. And I kind of broke my own rule here by switching those G's, that G and that E, so I have a fourth that doesn't resolve. But guess what? As a composer, we can kind of set out the rules, and then we can break them to do what we think sounds good. So just to quickly go over the ideas again, we're going to try and keep it mostly stepwise or jumping by thirds. If we jump by more than a third, we should probably step back in the opposite direction. And we should aim to have a high point for our melody. And then the kind of gravy on top of that is if you can work in the ideas of the motives and either rhythmic, melodic, things that keep coming back, that's going to help that melody stick in people's heads. So what I want you to do now is take a second and stop this video and get out a piece of stuff paper, sing me something. Just, it doesn't matter what it is. Sing something that you want to write down and try to write it down. See if you can figure out what you're singing and put it on paper. And then look at it and say, okay, so did what I sing kind of generally follow these rules? Did it have a high point? If you feel more comfortable with the piano than singing, by all means, play some stuff on the piano, try and hear what sounds good, and then write it down. So once you've finished writing that melody, come back and we'll try and maybe put some harmony to it.
Ooh, that was very catchy.
Yes,
very catchy.
Melodies should move by step, mostly follow big leaps with steps back. Have a high point in the middle, try to have motivic stuff.
Okay, let's keep going.
Let's do that again. All right, I'm glad that made an impression on them. Okay, so now we're going to start talking about harmonizing that melody. So just adding some chords to it. And probably the easiest way to start doing this and have it consistently come out sounding good, right, the way that you want it to, is to use what's called the Roman numeral system. So what the Roman numeral system basically is a way of labeling chords that shows their function, so how they work with one another. And it's really not that hard to do once you kind of get to grips with it. So let's do a very, very quick overview of the Roman numeral system, and there's a link to a longer video in the description if you want to find out more. So basically we have some scales here, right? I wrote the C major scale and the A natural minor scale. So I know you all practice your scales. So if I was going to give the scale degrees, I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then same here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So nothing hard about that, right? We're just counting up the scale and giving them numbers. If I unordered the scale, so the F came second, that would still be scale degree 4 in C major, because we always count when it's in order. So the Roman numerals are based on this. What we're going to do is just make some triads in the key. So we're not going to add any sharps or flats for now. Maybe a little bit later. We are just going to add a third and a fifth. So to make sure we're writing a root position triad, we want to make sure it's 3 consecutive lines, so that's 3 lines in a row, or 3 spaces in a row like this one. So that's going to tell me its root position. It's as close as it can get in 3 consecutive lines or 3 consecutive spaces. So I'm just going to, oops, that's a little too far. So I'm building these triads up, and again, we don't really have to think all that hard about it, because we know the key signature for C major, no sharps, no flats. If we were doing this in D major, there would be an F sharp and a C sharp in everything. So we're keeping it real simple. And then what we do is we change the scale degree number into a Roman numeral, and it gets to be a uppercase Roman numeral, like a capital, if it's major, and it gets to be a lowercase Roman numeral, so the small letter, if it's minor. So this first one, in C major, the C major chord is major. Hopefully that's not a surprise. So I'm going to turn that into a Roman numeral 1. This one, based on scale degree 2, is a minor chord. So, I can link another video that can help you figure out what triads are too. So that's going to get a lowercase 2. 3, also lowercase. And this pattern, this pattern of majors and minors is going to be the same across all major keys. So if we're writing in D major, 1 would still be major, 2 and 3 would be minor, 4, F major chord, would be major, 5, which is a G major chord, would be major, 6 would be minor, and 7 is my special diminished. And usually that 0 will be up there, but I don't have the ability to do that right now. So 7 diminished is a special kind of chord. So you hear the major, it's my G major chord, and you hear the minor. If you listen to diminished, it sounds unusually unstable. It's like one of those horror movie sounds, right? So that's a special chord that has to resolve a special way. So we're not going to deal with that too much today. So that's really all there is to it. We make sure we mark the major and minor ones by using upper and lowercase Roman numerals, and then there's diminished, which has a little circle next to it. In minor, we do the same thing. Just going to select the whole thing, and add thirds. Same deal. I'm keeping it diatonic. The only thing that's different is that because, when you're playing your scales, sometimes you play that harmonic minor. If we don't raise the leading tone, the 7th scale degree, like you do in that harmonic minor, then it sounds like pirate music, which could be really cool. Don't get me wrong. If you want to write pirate music, this natural minor scale with its minor 5 to 1 is going to give you very piratey sounding music. But for most classical sounding music, we're going to want that to be a G sharp. And then for this 7 diminished, usually that's a G sharp too. So I'm just going to quickly go through these, and this will be 2 diminished, major 3, minor 4, major 5 because we added that G sharp, major 6, this now is 7 diminished. If we hadn't added the G sharp, it would be a major 7. Oops, that went away. There, it's back. So yeah, and then 8 is the same. Sorry, that got a little bit clumsy looking. See if I can fix that. No, not really. Okay, you have to take my word for it. 2 diminished, 3, 4, major 5, major 6, and 7 diminished. You might be saying, okay, that sounds very interesting. I love to write Roman numerals. It's one of my favorite things to do. But what does it have to do with learning about harmony? That's a good question. So like I said, the Roman numerals tell you something about how the chords work together. Harmony often works when the roots, so if we're in root position, that's the lowest note in the chord, are moving by fourths or fifths. So 1 really likes to go to 4, and 4 or 2 really likes to go to 5. 5 likes to go back to 1. So if we're looking at the roots, 1 and 4 are a fifth apart, 1 and 4 are a fourth apart, obviously, fifth going down. 1 and 5 are a fifth apart. It basically works like that. So the fundamental idea here is that there's a basic structure, and you see it in almost all music, including popular music, and that's 2, 5, 1, and we always go that direction. We don't really go backwards from that too much. Like going 1, 5, 2 is going to sound a bit odd. Fancy word, retrogression. You're going backwards through a progression. So we have 2 going to 5, going to 1, and that's really the backbone of a lot of music. But you say, all right, well, we have all these other chords. How can I use those? Well, we can figure that out using some root motion. So if I think about what is a fifth away from 2, I get 6, right? So 6 really likes to go to 2. Okay. give this box a little extra room. So 6 likes to go to 2. We think about what's a fifth before that. 3 likes to go to 6. So if you start out at 3 and you kind of move through this, you're going to have a very good sounding progression. It's called a circle of fifths progression. You can go from that 1 to pretty much anywhere. You could go from 1 to 6 and then come back through to 5, 1. You could go from 1 to 5 to 1, right? 1, 2, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Whatever you want. And if you keep doing that, it's always going to sound good. Now we can add some nuance here, right? So 2 and 4, if you look at the chords themselves, D, F, and A, and F, A, and C, they only differ by 1 note, right? So often those are called predominants. That predominant comes before the 5, which is the dominant, which leads to the 1, which is called the tonic. They all have fancy names, but the only ones we really need to know today are predominant, the one that leads to the dominant, that leads to the tonic. So I can use a 4 instead of a 2. I can also go from 1 to 4 to 5 to 1. That works really well as well. I can finally go from 5, if I'm really feeling devious. 5 can go to 6. And that gives you a kind of deceptive sound. It's a way of making the phrase longer than it probably should have been to begin with. So you could go 3, 6, 2, 5, 6, 2, 5, 1. And that's a really cool thing to do as well. So if you take this and you apply it to whatever the melody you wrote was from our last video, I bet you could come up with something cool.
Hello everyone, we've been listening to this for quite some time now, so why don't you go and take a break and we'll be here when you get back. Okay. Let's go out to the lobby. Let's go out to the lobby. Let's go out to the lobby and have ourselves a snack.
I think it would be a good idea to go through and talk about it with the melody that we wrote last time. So I'm going to say for this, we're going to start out simple with the really fundamental harmonies, and then we're going to try and fancy it up a bit, because it's really boring if we just do 1, 4, 5, 1, 4, 5, 1 over and over again, or 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1. So we'll try and spice things up. But the first thing to do is to really get the basics. So we're going to look at the notes in the chord, and if we go back to C major, we see that E and G are both in that C major chord. We probably want to start the piece with a 1 chord and end it with a 1 chord. That's usually what happens. So I'm going to put this whole first measure as C, E, G as a 1. And then this D really is just embellishing it. We don't need to change chords for every pitch. So it sounds pretty nice, right? I could technically do that again, right? But then I feel like I'm getting a little bit too much 1. Actually, it sounded okay. Here's where things change a little bit. So we get that A, and it's in an accented place, right? So the first beat of the bar is pretty accented. So we're probably going to need 2 chords here. So we're looking at the A. Let's look up here. We could do 6, or we could do 4. Again, we're going to keep things pretty simple for right now. I'm going to suggest doing 4. And in a later video, we'll talk about, or later parts of this video, we'll talk about how to make the bass part a little bit fancier for this. But again, right now, we're just bare bones. So I'm going to go 4 to catch that A, and then I'm going to go back to 1. 4 can go to 1. That's a totally usual cadence, or not cadence, progression. And then, how about, since we used 4 there, why don't we use 2 here, because F and A belong in both the 2 chord and the 4 chord. So I'm going to use 2. And then when we talked last time, we said this was a half cadence, so why don't we go with 5? I'll spread it out so it sounds nice. So what I want you to notice is we start out really slow with our harmony, and then we start to get a little bit faster as we come towards the cadence. That's something you can think about when you're writing music. It's called harmonic rhythm, and it basically means how often the chords change. So the more often the chords change, the more exciting the music feels, right? And if the chords stay the same for a long time, it kind of feels relaxed. So you can control the speed of your piece, the momentum that you're building up, by changing the chords at a faster or slower pace. Let's listen to this first line. It's pretty. I like it. All right, so let's do the second line. We have a C and an A, and then that B again. It's really just embellishing that C. So C and an A could be an F major, but let's go with A minor because we know that 5 can sometimes go to 6 and sound pretty good. And then let's see, this next measure we have B, A, G, and then E. So that seems to be outlining a 3 chord, which isn't very helpful for us because 6 should be going to 2 to 5 to 1. But let's let it go where it wants to and put that 3 chord in there. Okay. So it's always good to listen back to what you've got. It really feels like it wants to go to C major again, and then like C, oops, and then G, because we want 5 to 1 far ending, right? So 5 to 1 makes that authentic cadence that gives us that sense of closure. So let's listen to this, see how that 3 is working. I'm not 100% convinced about it. I bet we can do better. It's actually not that bad. So as you can see, the rules of thumb, that harmonic progression that we wrote at the top, sometimes you can do other things and it sounds great too. So really use your ear as a guide, but then use that chart if you get stuck, right? Okay, so this is kind of boring the way it is. So let's spice it up a bit. So see if we can build off this C, big C major chord at the beginning. So let's start on C like we would, it's a good note to start on. But then we have this E, G, and we go back to E. So maybe if I did a 3 chord, and 3 would naturally want to go to 6. So could we go to 6 maybe? Go C. And the reason I'm spreading them out like this is because if you get too low in the piano stuff and you put 3 notes in that root position, it can sound really muddy. So yeah, if you're wondering why I'm spreading it out, I wouldn't necessarily write it like that if I was not playing it on the computer. So 6 wants to go to 2, wants to go to 5, and luckily we have a 4, so I'm in an F, so we can have 2 and then 5. So let's listen to that. So all I did was kind of break down the harmony a bit. That C and that E minor chord really functioning as a big 1 chord, but it gives it a little extra color. See, it adds a little bit of movement, and now it makes this feel like a half cadence. So it makes it feel like we have 4 2-measure cadences instead of 2 larger phrases. Okay, so let's keep this F major here. Sounds nice, right? And I think going back to the C major is fine. Let's do something with this D minor chord. So, one early on, I accidentally added another note on top of all of these. So some of these chords sound really good with a 7th A seventh is just the fourth note if you're doing a series of spaces or lines. So space, 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 space gives me a 2-7 chord, and it sounds really cool. 3-7 sounds pretty good. The major sevens don't sound so great, like 1-7 and 4-7. 5-7 on the other hand is really important. It gives us a very strong pullback towards 1. So I'm just gonna add those as options for us: 2-7, 5-7, and 6-7. And 2-7 by far is the one that you, well, I guess 5-7 is the one you see most, but 2-7 is probably the second most. So let's make this a little bit fancier. So let's put the F in the bass instead of the D. We'll keep the D there, and then we'll add a C up here. I realized that no one could play this, but we could put that in the right hand, right? So now listen to the second phrase with that extra juicy 7th chord. Sounds nice, right? Because we get this 4-5 stepping in the bass, we have this 7th of the chord coming down to the B, and then we have that root motion by fifths, so the root of the D minor chord to the root of the G major chord. All right, almost there. I am going to, well, let's add the 7th here just to keep things really interesting. I'm going to keep that A minor chord, but I'm going to expand it a little bit. So we had A minor, and remember A likes to go to D minor, but we can switch out F. So why don't we switch out F here for the second part of this measure. Okay, and then I'm going to go from that 4 to the 5 instead of the 3. And then I'm going to bring it to an authentic cadence. This would be an imperfect authentic cadence, but we don't need to worry about that too much. And then we'll start on the C again, and then maybe that 6th chord with the 7th. You say that G doesn't belong in, but it can really sound nice, give it a lot of color, and that's what we're looking for. Interesting chords and color. Okay, and then this one's just for me. That E with the 4. I know I told you not to use 4-7, but I think it's going to sound really nice. So we've got 4-5-1. Okay, so we've followed all our rules, right? 3 goes to 6, 2, 5. 5, because we're starting a new phrase here, we're going to start on 4, and then 1, 2, 7, 5. 6, because 5 goes to 6 nicely. 4, 5, 1, 1, 6, 4, 5, 1. So yeah, let's see how it sounds. Doesn't that E sound nice there? So be careful how you use those major chords with 7s, but they can sound really nice. And the reason this works is because we prepare it with an E in the previous measure. So really that's all there is to harmonizing. You look at the notes that you have in the chord, you see if you can make them fit that basic phrase pattern. Everything will be able to fit if you're writing diatonically, 4, 5, 1. But that gets boring after a while. So if you can sub in 2s, if you can sub in 6s, and very occasionally 3s. 3s are a little bit tricky to use because they really want to go all the way back through that circle, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. That can really add a lot of harmonic color to your piece. Next, we're going to look at how we can use pop progressions to also build harmony for pieces. And in this one, we'll go through 4 different pop progressions and write melodies for each one. All right.
Oh yes, I used to like 2-5-1 quite a lot. I used it over and over and over and over again. How about you, Brahms? What chord progressions did you like?
Oh well, I like 1, 7 diminished 7 to 5, back to 1 to flat 6, minor 4,
Oh.
2 half diminished 7.
Maybe we should
Yes,
move
maybe
on.
we should keep moving.
Okay.
Alright, enough of that nonsense. Let's talk about pop chords. So, Roman numerals, the way we talked about them, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1, really great if you want to write classical music, and it can be really effective if you want to write kind of pop music, rock music, popular styles, right? That being said, there are a couple of chord progressions that are used a lot in popular music that you can kind of write almost any diatonic pitch over. By diatonic, I mean a pitch within the scale, and it's going to sound good, or at least okay, and then you could tweak it until it sounds good. So I collected 4 of these here, and we'll kind of give them names and talk about them. I decided to put them with Roman numerals because we know all about those now, right? And that means that if I know this is 1, 5, usually in first inversion, that's what the 6 means, 6, 4, then I can do it in C major. But I can also do it in E major, right? It'd be an E major chord, a B major chord, a C sharp minor chord, and then a major chord, right? So let's listen to these, and we'll kind of name them so we can kind of refer to them easily. So this first one, so you might recognize that because it's used in, I'm going to make up a statistic here, at least 60% of the popular music out today. So let's do it again.
Let it go, don't hold it back anymore. Let it go, run away and slam the door.
And you just cycle through these again and again and again. And you can kind of switch them up. Maybe we'll try that a little bit later to build some interest, but you can make an entire song like Jason Mraz's I'm Yours out of just that progression. Another progression that you probably heard before is this one.
Heart and soul, I gave my love to you. Do, do, do. I don't really know these words. Scooby-Doo, doo, doo.
So right, as you just heard, it's the heart and soul progression, right? And being used in a number of other things, but you probably all have tried plunking that out on the bum ba dum 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 ba. So that's another great one that you can write pretty much anything over and it will sound good. This one, we're in A minor, so we're in a minor key for this one. It sounds a little bit more melancholy, maybe. But what it is just this original chord progression up here. But we start on the A minor chord and cycle through A minor, F major, C major, G.
It's my life. It's now or never. I don't want to live forever. I just want to live while I'm alive.
And the last one, this
Good,
one's a
good.
little bit of an oddball, but I picked it because it sounds kind of epic a little bit. So this one sounds like this. So that B before the 7 is actually a flat. So flat 7 means the major chord, because it's uppercase, built on the lowered 7th scale degree. So in C major, the 7th scale degree is B, right? C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And if we lower that a half step, we get B flat. So that's where that flat 7 comes from. All right, so let's pick one of these. Let's pick this one. And I'm just going to copy and paste it a bunch of times. Right, so I'm going to come down here and do it again, and then maybe I'll do a little bit of the heart and soul one as my B. So you remember our song form is A, A, B, A, right? So I have my A, B, and then I'll come back to this original for A. So now I have that So yeah, let's focus on this first thing. See, we can write a little poppy kind of thing. So I'm still going to aim for a nice high point because, as we discussed, high points still happen, right? Even in popular music. So we'll let the chord settle first. I'm going to give it a rest, and then maybe just sort of outline the chord, keep it fairly normal. And then we've got F major, so F, A, and C. Now I'm going to use a note that's outside the chord first, and with F major, or with the 4 chord in major or the 6 chord in minor, this B, which is the 7th scale degree, sounds really cool. So as long as you resolve it by step, it sounds really awesome. So we'll hear that in a second. So you'll notice that this measure has only one note that's the same as this F major chord. And you might think, oh, it's going to sound awful. But I think if we listen to it, it's going to sound okay. Sounds kind of poppy, right? So hopefully going to prove my point that you can write almost any notes above these chords and it's going to sound good. So ba-dum-bum. I'll keep this one mostly in the chord, and then this one we'll use as kind of a half cadence, and then we'll build to a nice high point up here. And I've been using these 8th dotted quarter, I'll use the other way around, dotted quarter 8th. Let's go that one. And then I'll switch that up. So again, I'm trying to emphasize that B over this F major chord because it sounds cool. At least I think it sounds cool. All right. Let's see. So I'm going to use an F over the C major chord. And again, that's kind of a little bit unusual, but I think it will sound good. And another nice half cadence. Now we're into our B section. Sorry, I had to zoom out so we could see the whole thing. Alright, so we're into our B section now. So let's start here and see if we can build a nice high point from that. So now we're into our heart and soul progression. Let's be up nice and high. Get that F up here. I like this little syncopated rhythm. It provides a little bit of motion, even though my bass is very boring at the moment, right? My left hand's very boring. We spice this up later. Let's see. Again, I'm just kind of putting notes in that I think will sound good, and I can't say it enough, it's going to sound good over these chord progressions. Now we're back to our A again. So let's just kind of dance around that. And kind of bringing it back to the beginning so that we can feel a little bit of a coming home after that B section. Let's go down to E, then and then maybe we'll add one more C major chord at the end. Put that one in there. Just so we feel like we have a cadence. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, so lots of stuff to kind of take in here. I was just kind of singing along in my head and thinking what would work well. Mostly everything did. So let's listen to it and see how it goes. Hear it with a drum beat. And honestly, this could be even better if it was, it's not a 7 chord, if it went to that A minor and could have brought us back to the slightly melancholy. Ooh, cymbal roll. So hopefully what this goes to show is that you can use these progressions from over here, and you can write pretty much anything over them. What you should try if you have the piano skills is learn these progressions, and you can just make up stuff with your right hand on top, and it will sound good. I used to play parties when I was a teenager, and I would play this Heart and Soul for like 2 hours. I would switch keys from time to time, but I would just kind of make up stuff with my right hand, and as long as I stayed on the white keys, if I was in C major, it sounded good. No one knew. So give them a try. See what happens if you write a melody. You can switch between this one and this one, or just keep one for the whole time, and see what comes out. Alright, let's see what Mozart and Brahms are doing.
Brahms? I always wondered, when I, knew you, you didn't used to sound like a German version of Cookie Monster. Why do you now?
I do not know what you're talking about. I've always sounded this way. Why don't you ask Mozart why he doesn't have a German accent anymore, and why he sounds overly excited about everything.
No need to be defensive. Let's throw it back over to Matt. Okay. Bye.
Alright, enough of that nonsense. So let's talk about ways that now we can take what we have. So we have a melody, we have a harmony that's interesting, not just 1-4-5, but has substitutions and uses a lot of that circle progression, and see if we can make it into something that has a rhythmic left hand that drives us forward. So I'm going to talk about 4 different ways that we can do this, and of course there are many ways to do it. You can mix and match these 4, or you can make up your own, obviously. But here are 4 that have kind of stood the test of time. The first is block chords. So a block chord is just basically what we did earlier, right? It's just the chord without any particular rhythm to it. So what's in this measure is a block chord. I have it going from a 1 to a 5. And you'll notice the 5 isn't in root position. If it was in root position, it would look like that. And our hand, if we were playing it on the piano, would be moving quite a long way to go from that 1 chord to that 5 chord. So sometimes it's really nice, not only for the sound, but also for actually playing it on the piano, to have it in different inversions so that it's easier. And this is best if you're playing it on the piano, to sit down and see, okay, what fits my hand the best. So these are block chords. They work okay. They work well for slow music. You can kind of roll them, but there are other things that can give us a little bit more momentum. Here's a quick alternative to a block chord that changes the texture a little bit. So when I think about texture, there are 2 different kind of musical meanings for that. One is about how the music is set up. Is it one melody plus accompaniment? Is it lots of melodies going on at the same time? But it can also mean the density of the accompaniment plus the melody. So here we have 1 note, which isn't very dense, right? Followed by 3 notes that is. So this measure just gives you a little bit more motion, so that you can really feel the root, right? And then we can fill it out with the rest of the chord. This next one's called Alberti bass. It was used in the classical period a lot, and other periods too. It works really well. It's just taking the chord and separating it into different notes. Usually it has a low note followed by upper notes that have been not exactly arpeggiated, but alternated. So in this case we have, and that's just my C major chord. Then you see in this next measure, I have a big G7 chord, so G, B, D, F. And what I've done is used a D and a B to give myself kind of a bass line. So C, D, B. It's going to sound quite nice that way. So again, I'm going to try to say, well, I'm going to actually say, don't just keep it in root position. It's going to get pretty boring pretty quickly. If you can mix things up with the different inversions, putting different chord notes in the bass, that's going to help keep things interesting and give you a smooth bass line that might be easier to play. My third thing is the arpeggios. So I'm sure we've all run across those. We have a basic arpeggio here. I added a D in. This D is not in the chord, but because I'm stepping into it and stepping out in the same direction, it's called a passing tone. It actually sounds quite nice. So listen to this. And you can kind of build that sort of pattern over and over again. And then this one I had an A minor chord, and I kind of Alberti'd the end of it. So I have the beginning of an arpeggio and the ending that's still arpeggiated, but also has a little touch of that Alberti style. And then finally I have what I call the lazy musical theater rhythm. And I don't mean that in a mean way, but if I ever am writing that kind of music and I don't know what to write, I will always use this da 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 da, because there's no rhythm that will give you more of a sense of drive than this sort of syncopated, not very syncopated, but a little bit syncopated. And of course, syncopated means that the main beats don't line up with your the big beats in your rhythm. So here we have, and again, that G major chord is in first inversion to keep it interesting, keep it playable. So I have our melody from last time. This is our more classical melody. Play just a couple of measures. What I've done is I've kind of used a little bit of Alberti bass and a little bit of arpeggios so that we can see how they work together. So we start off with arpeggios, and then we build out this we start out with Alberti, and then we build out this arpeggios. So let's take a listen to the whole thing. So as you can hear, it sounds a lot more, it has a lot more movement to it. It sort of drives us towards each of these cadences. I think with pedal it would sound really nice, but maybe it's a little bit thin. I think we could probably build on it a little bit. So what I did was over here, I kept the left hand exactly the same, but on the right hand I just kind of added notes from the chords to fill out that texture a little bit, to make it a little denser from time to time. And I tried to control when I had 2 notes versus 3 notes to make it so that we go from slightly less dense to more dense. Again, that can drive a sense of momentum. So let's listen to this. I don't think there's anything that we need to talk about in the bass. It's just the same chords. I've just split them up in that Alberti style or a more of an arpeggiated style to provide some contrast. The only thing that maybe needs a little bit of explanation in here is that this D does not belong in that C major chord, right? And what I'm basically doing is making a big passing tone, like we were talking about a minute ago. I'm stepping into that note that's not in the chord. I'm stepping out in the same direction to a note that is in the chord, and that makes it sound intentional, and it sounds pretty good. That's actually what we were doing with this A2 when we were writing the original melody. So just listen to that measure one more time. You hear how that E, D drops to E, C, and it sounds nice and rich. So that's the reason that I did that. So again, this is not anything particularly challenging, I think. It's mostly just taking what we know, so we know the notes of the chords, and adding them as I heard. I was gonna say as I saw fit, but as I heard fit, maybe. So yeah, that's kind of our finished version of our first melody. Now we have a more poppy kind of melody. So just a reminder, we have our A minor, F major, C major, G major progression, followed by our heart and soul progression down in the middle. And we have that A, B, A, and that's really being controlled by the harmony in this one more than by the melody. So what I tried to do was do some inversions to keep it playable so it's not jumping from root to root. I did use a fair amount of root position. In this B section, I tried to break it up a bit by having, like we did at the beginning, just the first note followed by the actual chord. So it gives you a sense of really where the root is, even if the other chord is in different inversions. Also, something you'll notice is that most of the time I'm using the basic ba-ba-ba-ba-ba, but sometimes to give it a little bit of contrast, which again is what really drives music, I've just tied those two middle ones together, those two, to make this kind of rhythm, which is this, which is fully syncopated. Finally, I added a little counter melody in here. That just means a melody that goes with the other melody. And what I did was take pieces of our original classical melody and see if I could fit them in here. So we've got bum 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 bum, and then it kind of slows down into the end. But you'll notice with this chord progression, like I said when we were talking about it, you can write almost any white note and it will sound okay, or any note within the key and it will sound okay. And so as you're listening to it, see when this comes in, if it adds some interest and makes it, this B section really stand out, and then that carries through into the ending. Okay, let's take a listen. Maybe you decide to write something like that, counter melody. It can be really effective to use seconds that open up, so, or just seconds on their own. It's a very Disney kind of sound. So like here we have a second between the E and the D, between the D and the C. If you just listen to these seconds, you might say, oh, that sounds kind of ugly. But in the context of that chord, it sounds pretty. So don't be afraid to use things that are not just triadic. Just try things out, and you might find things that surprise you, right? And can add a lot of color to your music. So that's kind of it. We've made our two pieces. One's quite short, just a melody and an accompaniment. This one's more of a full piece. It has A, B, A. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about how to put words to music, because that's a really important skill, and then we're going to kind of wrap things up. So, yep.
Oh, yes, very nice. I really liked that. It was quite catchy. Were you ever in a band, Mozart?
Oh, of course. Everyone was in my day. I was in a cool band called the Alberti Basses. It was 4 upright basses and me on the keyboard. We rocked
splendid.
Vienna pretty much every night. I don't think that's true, but okay, let's learn about words and music. All right, let's figure out how to set some words to music. One of the key things to do if you want to write songs. So the first thing we have to do is kind of read it through and understand what the text is about. Sometimes it's deeper than others. I'm going to go with this one is not super deep, but it mostly came from me looking out of my window and thinking about how hot it's been this last week. So I can't decide which season I like best, summer, winter, or fall, or spring. All of them have some mild irritations, but each of them has some zing. Yeah, I spent a long time thinking about that rhyme, and that was the best one that came up, so enjoy. So the first thing now, after we've read it and thought about what it's about, which is about not really being able to decide which the best season is, we have to separate it into syllables. So, syllables, just the different stresses in the words. So I clearly has one syllable, but decide has two. So we need to figure out where to split it. So let's open up decide. So you always want to split it after a vowel if you can. So decide. Because if you say it like that, I can't decide, the first part ends with the vowel sound, right? You don't want to des and then I'd. That doesn't sound right. So that's why we always try to split it after the vowel. Which season, so it's not season, season, so we're going to split it there. I like best summer. If you have two consonants in a row, split it in the middle, and that's where the summer, winter, or fall, or spring, all of them have some mild irritations. Alright, so I have two R's, I'm going to split it in there, irre, and then I have another syllable here, tations, but each of them has some zing. Okay, so now that we've figured that out, we have to figure out which syllables are more important than other syllables. And so this is something that comes from speaking it through for yourself. So maybe pause the video and take a second and try and figure out which syllables are more important than other syllables. Okay, I'll wait. Alright, I'm going to assume you did that. So the way that I read it as I can't decide which. So there's an emphasis on the I. Oops. Let's see. I can't decide. There's an emphasis on the decide, because if I put the emphasis on the D of decide, it would be like I can't decide, which again doesn't sound right, which season I like best. So season I like, like best. And you could actually choose different ones. You could say, I can't decide which season I like best, right? Because it's about you. Often it's really good to hit those pronouns. But I like the way that like almost rhymes with just the side of decide. So season I like best. Summer. So it's not summer, it's summer. So I put a thing there. Summer, winter, or fall, or spring. So what about or spring? Fall or spring doesn't sound right, so or spring. It's going to be my important syllable. All of them, not all of them, all of them have some mild irritations. So the word irritations, you just say it a couple of times, stop making any sense, right? Irritations. Feels like tay of irritations is where that accent comes. But each of them has some zing. So you might wonder, why did we bother with this? Why did we put all these stars up here? The reason we did is because music has accents too, right? So we're thinking about 4/4, we think 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So 1 and 3 are pretty big beats. 2 and 4 are a little bit weaker. So if you have an accented syllable, you're going to want to put it on an accented beat. You're not going to want to put it with a short note in the middle of a beat, right? So we'll see if we can create something where it's just wrong. You'll hear it pretty quickly, I think. So keeping this in mind, let's say it one more time and try and get the sound of the rhythm of your speech in your head. It's a really good idea if if you feel comfortable reading these things, that you try to get the rhythm of your speech to be roughly the same as the rhythm of your music. So I can't decide which season I like best, summer, winter, or fall, or spring. So let's just take that much. So I'm gonna I can't do is a triplet, right? So I can't decide which. It's a pretty slow fall. So let's give that maybe 4 equals 60. I can't decide which season I go back to our triplets. So C. This isn't our melody. This is just us trying to figure out a rhythm. Season I like best. Summer. So summer, winter, or fall. Could do that a couple of ways. It could be summer with the dotted quarter. Summer. I can't decide which season I like best. Summer, winter, or fall. So winter or this actually needs to be half the speed since we're going to 60. Sorry. Summer, winter, or fall, or spring, right? Fall or spring. And then the rest of it has a similar rhythm to that. So like all of them have some mild irritations, and this actually should be triplets, irritations, but, because but is the pickup for us, but each of them, they should have made this 12/8, each of them has some zing. Alright, so that's kind of what we've got. Let's listen to that and think about what we've got. So really, really entertaining, right? It's that thing again. Let's put the lyrics with that. I can't decide which season I like best. Oh no, don't go over there. Summer, winter, or fall, or spring. All of them have some mild irritations, but each of them has some zing. I know you can't see that, but we'll get it back in just a second. Whoosh, all back. Okay, so this is a very syllabic setting of this text. You can of course add more than one note per syllable. Maybe we'll try that a little bit. And that is, depending on how long it is, can be called melismatic. It's fancy words. A lot of the time, popular music tends to be mostly syllabic with some melismatic moments in important places. So let's see if we can add one in here. Let's try this. Each of them has some zing, right? Has. So let's try like as some, and then we'll move that there. So when you write more than one note per syllable, you slow them together so that we know, right? As some zing. Okay, so now that we have our basic rhythm, and it's really easy with certain texts, especially if you're trying to set something like Shakespeare where it has a really set rhythm of syllables, like how oft, where, now, my music placed. No, it's a sonnet. it's easy to kind of fall into eighth quarter, things like that. Try to make it more natural, like the way you would speak it, which is what I tried to do a little bit here, and that will help it to feel, well, more natural. So now let's say we're in C major, because C major is easy to think in, right? So I'm just gonna kind of shape these and make them mostly stepwise, because the more stepwise it is, the easier it is to sing. If you have a jump, it's gonna accent a syllable. So if I jump to that sun of season, because sun isn't the accented one, right? So that would accent that season, even though it's not on a strong beat. So I can't let's see. I can't decide which season. You see how even trying not too hard, adding that high jump on season makes the zun feel more important than it should be. So if we did it the other way around, so season I like best. I can't decide which season I like best. That works well because the accent that we created by adding a jump actually accents the syllable that we need to accent. So because it's a jump of a fourth, I'm going to step back. So I can't decide which season I like best. Summer, winter, or fall, or spring. And then because I like that kind of period format, I started the same way. All of them have some. And we decided irritations, right? So tations is the most important there. Have some mild irritations. Yeah. So I put a little jump there and the high point to accent the T of irritations. All of them have some mild irritations, but each of them has some zing. Yeah, maybe that. Okay, now we'll put a final bar line on it. So really that's all there is to writing music with words. You first separate the words into syllables, and then you say, okay, which syllables are most important? Figure that out so that you know if you're going to do jumps, if you're going to put things on strong accents in the music, do you know where to line those things up so that it doesn't sound like it's on the wrong syllable? And then try to speak it and figure out roughly what rhythm you're speaking it in. And then you just add notes and use all the melody learning tools that we did earlier.
I can't decide which season I like best, summer, winter, or fall, or spring. All of them have some mild irritations, but each of them has some zing. Oh, good.
I'm not 100% sure about that has, but it's more illustrative than anything else. All right, so we're almost done. We're going to wrap up now.
Well done. You've made it through an awful lot of videos. So let's kind of wrap things up now and talk about what we've learned. So the first thing to do when you're trying to compose is do some things called pre-compositional activities. The first one, of course, is to think about what key you want, what time signature. We did a lot in C major and 4/4, but I understand that there are other keys and other time signatures. Of course, if you're working with words, figure out the syllables like we just did, and then you can start to work on the rhythm from there. The next pre-step is to think about the form. Do you want it to be a pretty simple binary form piece, a slightly more complicated ternary form piece, one of those song forms, AABA,
Basically, the sky's the limit with all of this stuff. It just is entirely up to you and how you think your piece is going to unfold. But if you can have that form in your head from the beginning, it's going to help you to shape it. Remember, contrast is the key. It's what's going to help us keep the music moving forward.
Got to do that.
Yes. So now that you've got that all down, we're going to try and write a melody. So think about the following things. Try to have a little snippet of idea that you can spin out into a lot of stuff. It's really easy to have kind of idea, and all of them be new and exciting. But music holds together better if it has just a couple that you introduce at the beginning and then develop as the piece goes along. So use those motives, make the melody. Try to keep it mostly stepwise. We don't want ba ba boo boo ba. We want to go out humming it, right? Right. You can have some jumps to make things interesting, but if you have a big jump, make sure you step back from it again. And then finally, you want both your melody and your piece to have high points. So try to have a high point for each individual melody and then a really high point roughly 2/3 of the way through the piece.
Yes, good idea.
Yes. And then what we're going to do is write a harmony. So I suggest that you start with the most simple things first. So big chords that take in most of the measures. So big 1, big 2 or 4, 5, 1. That's going to form the kind of foundation for everything.
Yes.
And then after that, you can start to add things that substitute for those. You could add sevenths to those minor chords in particular. You can you can add harmonic rhythm to make it feel like we're getting faster towards the cadence. Just be careful if you're writing a classical piece to usually try to stick to that 3-6-2-5-1. 1 can go to any of those things, and then we just kind of slip back down that slide back to 1. So it would be 1-6-2-5-1 or 1-6-4-5-1. Or even just 1-4-5-1. And remember that 5 can go to 6, and that's a really cool, deceptive moment that will keep the audience coming back for more. If you're doing pop music, then try using those 4 chord progressions. They're really powerful, and as we said, we can write pretty much anything we want on top, and it's gonna sound good. So
very flexible.
My big suggestion is look at the music that you're playing on your instrument. Listen to the music that you like on Spotify.
Very good.
YouTube, those things.
What is Spotify?
And then say, what makes these work? And try and use that stuff in your own pieces.
Great composers steal.
Great contrast.
Then after you've done that harmony stuff, we're almost there. Just have to activate that left hand so it's not just block chords. You can do that through using arpeggios, or you can do that Alberti bass that I like so much, or you can use the lazy musical theatre rhythm and some syncopation. Pretty much whatever you want. It's just don't just let it sit, otherwise it gets a bit boring. We never want the audience to be bored. So activate the texture by creating rhythm with the left hand. And then we'll all love to hear what you wrote. We want to play it for our friends, want to play it for our teachers, for our parents. And then hopefully keep composing. The more you compose, the better at it you get. So start small,
get discouraged.
And get bigger and bigger. We hope you've enjoyed this presentation. And guess we should probably thank Matthew Heap for all of his hard work with this.
He put me in this act.
Yes.
Not too much.
Have a great day, everybody.
Yes.
And
Bye-bye.
we'll see you next time. Goodbye.